talking about.
You really don't know about Memorex?
I have no idea what you're talking about. Memorex, what is that?
Oh my gosh, dude! I might have to look up an old commercial. That's an old commercial.
Are you referring to something that was pre-1990?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you got to realize that's how young I am.
Well, yeah, that doesn't shock me. Not surprised by
That
this.
doesn't shock me.
No. Ancient of days.
You just got really dark.
Yeah, and yes,
Jess?
not just, man.
Psh, whatever. Welcome to another episode of Metabolic Radio. Now you can actually see us.
Sorta.
Well,
If you're
kinda.
not blending with the darkness.
Well, welcome to this episode. What are we, 102 now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so Shane and I have been experimenting with a lot of different things, and we wanted to test out doing a Skype call. Like we talked about, we're going to be having a lot of people that we're going to be interviewing that are in the fitness industry, and not all of them are local, and so we wanted to make sure that everything's working, all of our equipment's good. So this episode is coming to you via Skype. So for those of you who are used to a little bit of that higher quality, we've been playing around with the different equipment, and I'm sure it'll get better as we become more familiar with it. But sorry if the sound quality has decreased a little bit, but this will just
I'm
be
sharing
for...
my blue light.
Yeah, you look cute.
Yep.
But this will just be for our interview episodes, or when Shane and I are not able to get together. So what we're going to try to do... Oh, Shane, I just lost your video.
Nice. Go away.
Technical difficulties. Hopefully that doesn't happen for
yes.
too long. Saved you. Okay. So...
Sorry, I minimized you. You're
Don't minimize me, man.
Yeah, that's what I do.
But anyway, so today it's Q&A time. So we're going to answer questions from listeners like you. Shane?
Yep.
Do you want to do the honors of the first one?
Like me?
Or do you...
Sweet. Okay, my question.
Your question. What's your question?
I'm just kidding. I think it deals with Memorex.
I don't have a Memorex of that.
Oh, I am so going to send you a link. I am so sending you a link on that. Yes, sir.
All right. Well, anyway.
Okay.
First question for today comes from Chad. Chad, he's a fairly newer member to the forum, yeah?
Ish. He's been around for a while. Chad's in there. He's been in there for quite some time. He's not old.
Well, I don't think we've answered we've answered one question from him before, right?
At least
sorry,
one.
Chad.
Yeah.
My clients tell me all the time I have the memory of a gnat, so sorry.
And that's living large.
Yeah, that's a good day. But
Yep.
we did give Chad some feedback in the forum, but we wanted to share this question because we thought it was important for all the listeners, so that's why it's in today's Q&A. Chad says, hot versus warm therapy. I'd like your thoughts on one of the podcasts. Wait, what is it? On one of the podcasts, little faith in cold showers for what? For fat loss was alluded to, but never expanded upon. Oh, I see. Okay, so in one of our past episodes, we talked about either ice baths or some type of cold therapy. And so he's kind of wanting us to expand more on that. What are your thoughts, Shane? What do you like? Ice, cold, heat?
I'm not a fan of heat.
Why is that?
Because, well, I can't say I hate heat. It's just got to be used correctly.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the cold overall is a more effective all-around thing.
Yeah. So the research that I've looked at more by far supports the use of cold therapy treatments. I'm not going to talk about cryotherapy myself because I haven't really delved too much into it, but when I'm talking about cold treatments, I'm talking about ice. Things like ice baths, ice packs, that kind of thing. From what I understand, your circulatory system is affected by cold and heat, right? So if you apply heat, you're going to get vasodilation. You're going to get more blood flow. Your body's trying to eliminate heat. It's trying to regulate its temperature, so you're going to get higher, more dilation of the blood vessels and arteries. So you're going to get more blood flow. Typically, when it comes to injuries, for acute injuries, that's not always a good thing, and often can be a bad thing, especially if it's causing more inflammation, because that is a pro-inflammatory response that's happening in the body. When it comes to acute injuries, typically ice is better, and there's different philosophies about the different protocols to use, like how long do you leave ice on, and how long do you leave ice off, and do you alternate it with ice and heat. But so I think it depends on the individual situation, why you would use heat or not. But I mean, really, what I tell people is it comes down to this: if one of them causes you pain and one of them doesn't, use the treatment that doesn't cause you pain. Typically, I personally have seen more. I don't really enjoy heat treatments unless it's something like a jet bath.
Well, give why, dude.
What's that?
Give why, because that's something we've talked about outside of this, but we haven't talked about on air.
So
Ooh, that was an interesting noise.
The pros and cons. The reason I don't like it con-wise is because I feel like I get more of an inflammatory response. I don't feel like it helps with joint pain and those kind of things. I haven't had any major injuries, so I couldn't really tell you. Well, actually, no, I have. Okay, so here's an example. When I have
lots of them.
This guy right here. When I was studying martial arts, Taekwondo specifically, when I first got into it, I was like a mid-ranked belt. I hadn't really gotten into fitness and lifting and training and things like that yet. But I was sparring, and basically I was sparring a Muay Thai based fighter, and he brought his shin up to block one of my kicks. And I'm pretty sure I ruptured a blood vessel in my foot, because I didn't break anything. But my foot swelled up, had some not serious, but some internal bleeding, lots of swelling, blood pooled in my foot. And I mean, it stabilized and everything. But the worst thing that I could do for that was put heat on it, because it just made pain worse, caused more vasodilation, so more blood flow, minor internal bleeding, bruising, that kind of thing. So the best thing I could have done for myself was ice, which is what I ended up doing. That brought down the inflammation. That ice also numbs the nerve endings as well, so it will typically decrease pain, and it'll decrease inflammation. It causes your blood vessels to vasoconstrict, so it limits blood flow. It brings down that inflammation, and typically numbs those nerve endings, so then you decrease that sensory pain response. But that's not to say that heat's a bad thing. It just depends on the nature of the injury, because heat also, blood flow, it's a double-edged sword, because blood flow aids in recovery, right? Like the more blood, I mean, it can, right? The more blood flow we get into the muscle, the more nutrient delivery we get, the more oxygen delivery we get, the more we can pump out dead cells or waste byproduct and that kind of thing. But you got to keep the balance, because it can also increase that pain response depending on the nature of the injury. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. So the biggest problem is the flooding effect on blood. So when you're talking about so I'm going to step back to ice for 2 seconds. So one of the good things about ice is it controls the inflammation and things like that for it controls it in such a way so that you can actually have a healing process start to begin. It makes so there's less issues in. Gosh, do you hear sorry to sidetrack for 2 blinks, but it started to bug me. Is that amplifying that noise we talked about before we started recording?
No, it's. I think it sounds the same as it was when we first started.
Okay, it was getting kind of unbearably loud for me for the seconds there.
Again, real
I'll
quick,
just
people,
make sure.
Apologies for any technical difficulties. We'll try to get this quality better in the future, but we wanted to start bringing you some video content too, because not all of you listen to us in the car, and not all of us like podcasts. So we're gonna have this on YouTube when you're watching it, and we'll post it on Facebook too.
Right. So anyway, okay. So back to what I was saying. But ice will what it does is it will slow the reactions of the blood flow to make it so your body can actually kind of go in and analyze and deal with an injury. That's one of the reasons why when you do something like a sprain or a twisted ankle concept, if you ice it, it makes it so that you have less problems, because part of the reason why blood floods in is it floods in to actually control the area and to make it expand and make it so that it doesn't have mobility. And that's one of the reasons why
That's a good point.
Injuries will take longer, right? So when you actually take that inflammation down at the beginning stages and get it under control, it stabilizes the whole nature of the beast. So when you throw heat on in a circumstance like that, what it does is it causes it to amplify that blood flow, and so you have a reaction that is restrictive. If that makes sense. So when you have your inflammation restriction, it causes a delay in repair in my eyes. Now, in the reverse of that, if you have, like, say, a muscular injury, not a big injury. So it depends on magnitude, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you have your basic small muscle fiber tears, not muscle tears, but muscle fiber tears that are really microscopic, what is blood flow going to do?
That typically come from just normal resistance training, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so when you have that, and you take into consideration that blood flow in that circumstance, it fills the nutrients in. Mm-hmm. So is heat going to help in that circumstances? It could. It would, at least a little bit. Mm-hmm. Is it going to give a major effect that's going to be outstanding in performance? Probably not, but it would give a little bit of a boost, right? Mm-hmm. But see, the reason why I'm more of a fan of ice is it's kind of twofold in how it deals with things. First, it slows things down, starts to get the body to react to it, takes down the inflammation, and it sets up the idea that you can move forward in stages, right? You're not fighting through a wall that your body's already creating. You're already kind of dealing with it. And so what it does, though, after a while, is your body starts to realize that it's cold. And so if you keep using it over an extended period of time, eventually it starts to go into the same kind of reaction as using heat, because your body starts to flood and throwing all this blood in and taking over that area and flushing it out. So you get kind of the best of both worlds, as long as you don't go too far.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing to really point out for people, is that that's where you want to be cycling that. What you want to do is apply ice for a certain period of time, but not too long. You're going to hear people say different things, like I've heard anywhere from 8 to 20 minutes, and then you take that same amount of time off, let the body slowly bring that temperature in that area back to normal, let blood naturally go back in there before you reapply ice again, just so that you're not leaving ice on there for too long and causing negative effects of overusing or abusing ice treatment.
So now, just for their benefit and just to see where you would go with this, what is one of the reasons that would be too long? What happens on a physiological base when you go too long with ice?
To be honest, I'm not like super well versed in terms of injury rehab, like in regards to these types of treatments. So my knowledge of it is a little bit more basic, but doesn't it have something to do with the damage that it can cause as a result, like to nerve endings for being cold for too long? Or am I just out there on that one?
No,
Okay.
You're absolutely right on that. So
because it can kill off cells, right?
Yes, and that's part of, like I said,
basically suffocating them from getting oxygen and blood flow for too long. Almost kind of like a tourniquet, kind of.
Sort of. Different scale, but let's take extremes again. I like to do that. So if you take somebody and you throw them out in the cold for an extended period of time, right? They're out there for hours or days, right? They're all of a sudden you start to have people call it gangrene, but their feet go black or their hands go black. Frostbite is where it stems from, right? That's like I said, that's the concept behind it. So if you leave on ice therapy for an extremely long period of time, that's what will happen. You'll start on a molecular and cellular level. You'll start to have death, if you will, and it can expand into things. It's harder to do that unless you do extreme stuff.
Yeah.
So, but that being said, that's one of the risks, and so that's why you want to be a little bit more cautious about it. Does it help things like muscle development or for fat loss, for things like that, there's actually a therapy dealing with shrinking, if you will, fat cells.
Oh, you're talking about cool sculpting?
It's the concept, yeah, right. And so what they do is they go in and they freeze fat cells.
Yeah.
And it causes people to have weight reduction. Does it work? Actually, it does.
Are you sure, dude? Because
absolutely, I know someone who did it.
Okay, but I just literally got a massage today from my friend, who
I'm not denying this.
One of his clients just came in.
Not denying where you're going.
And he told me they have spent over $10,000 on multiple cool sculpting treatments, and they have had zero weight loss. Their fat reduction has been minimal, if anything.
Okay,
and that's over 10K.
That means they haven't. Right, and I'm going to say this: that is the ultimate result of it, in my opinion. Anyway, all right. So does it work? Yes, it does. But this is where I was going with it.
But it doesn't.
It doesn't. It's short term. Okay, I've had friends who've had it done. Okay, and I'll tell you, did it work on her? Yes, it absolutely worked on her. It wasn't big, but you could see an actual effect. You could visibly see it.
Mm-hmm.
But did it last? Not even very. It didn't last as long as someone who goes on those crash diets.
My question is, when it comes to something like that, with cool sculpting specifically, how do we know it's not necessarily some other factor? Like, did your friend only do cool sculpting, or was she also trying to exercise and eat better and those kind of things? I mean, was this just too many factors in one thing, or did she really only try cool sculpting?
That's a fair question, because in all honesty,
and by the way, I do want to say, I don't know if that's the technical term for it. That is a company. I'm not necessarily trying to slaughter the company. I'm just talking about the general concept of the treatment. I don't know if that's the actual technical term for the treatment, so I apologize for that.
You have me at a loss on the actual true name.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I will research that in 2 blinks. I don't think it's worth grabbing it this very second.
Okay.
So can I answer that? She didn't really increase any of her activities from her and my conversations.
How was her nutrition?
Track. Normal. She wasn't like going out of her way to do anything special.
Mm-hmm.
She was doing that for a quick reaction. And like I said, the biggest problem is when you start to go into the concept behind this kind of stuff. This is the stuff that you got to look at in a realistic perspective, right? Is what does it do it on a physiological basis to make it so your body changes? So doing this stuff, is it something the body's going to fight against in the future? 100%.
Oh yeah, your body's an adaptive machine.
It is. And so what it's going to do is it's going to see that as an evasive attack, right? And so automatically it's going to set up a defensive mechanism to increase fat cells to react to that. So ultimately, if anything, it's going to exacerbate it, and it's going to make it a bigger problem than it was initially.
Yeah, because it's
so like I said,
go ahead. Sorry. No, you go ahead.
No, you're okay. Fine.
Be my guest.
But like I was saying, in the case of the gal that I'm talking about, did it work for her? It did, but it wasn't long term. It was very, very short term. It was like, I mean, the results that I noticed, the difference in her was in the course of days. Right? It wasn't months. It wasn't any kind of long-term period. It was really short-lived.
Did she gain it back?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Here's a question I have. How do we know that it's actually shrinking the fat cells?
Agreed.
And it's not just because cold, right? Cold causes vasoconstriction, right? Cells,
absolutely.
Our bodies are 60, 70, 80% water, right? Depending on the person. Those fat cells have water. So how do we know that it's not just causing this vasoconstriction and causing water reduction and weight loss and inch loss from water reduction?
Well, let's be realistic. Okay, let's not even take it from a proven scientific test. I'm going to just tell you straight up. The reality is, it is causing that.
Yeah,
we know it is. I mean, it has to. The body reacts on a physiological level. It reacts that way. Period.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're gonna have reactions. Let's take what happens to water when you throw it in ice. I mean, to turn it into ice, it expands. It expands it, and it'll shatter its actual vessels that are around it, right? So so ultimately, what's going to happen is you've got circumstantial stuff that it can't It can't do anything else but do that if you freeze it even in the body.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that's the kind of stuff that you've got to understand in these circumstances. It's just ridiculous to me that people don't see that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So, but like I said, when you start talking about cold and warm therapies, you've got to understand that the reality of this stuff is it going to be a long-lasting, great thing to do? No. You know, does it give people relief? Yes. I mean, it's. Do I think some of that's mental? Sure. Do I think some of it's not? You know, it really, there's so many factors that go into this because, again, like we've always said, it's individual.
So do you know specifically what the research says in orientation to ice baths specifically for recovery? So let's talk, like we're not talking injuries anymore. Let's talk about recovery, because that's really popular amongst MMA athletes, the UFC, and high school and collegiate level athlete like football and stuff like that. I've read some research on it. I honestly can't remember off the top of my head what it said, other than it basically said it works for recovery. But I just don't remember what the circumstances of that was. But to my understanding, ice is very good for recovery, whether that's ice treatment on a specific muscle group or a joint. Can be, or an actual ice bath itself.
Well, it's just it's like those cryo tanks, dude. People get in those cryo tanks. What does it do? It actually causes, because the body adapts to it and cells die. So part of what we've been talking about in this is the fact that people, when they go in and have this done, it kills cells off. I mean, that's what it does. So the body naturally reacts to stuff, and it sets it down in such a way that as the cells die, they repropagate. So what happens?
Cellular regeneration.
Yes, so it causes people to have more of a youthful reaction. So is there beneficial aspects to it? Yeah, absolutely there is. But again, you've got to take some considerations on this stuff and say, what is the reality behind why this is happening? I mean, you're killing cells and they're reliving. Is that a recovery factor? It is to an extent, right? I mean, the body is recovering, but you're putting an outside attack on the body that's completely unrelated to what they would be doing usually.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense based off of the concepts that the body is an adaptive machine, in that it's going to adapt to the stress that is applied to it. And especially if as we know, all of our body's systems, cells, all the cells in your body go through a cellular regeneration cycle.
Yes.
Which some of them die off, your body processes them, cleans them out, and new cells are produced. And over a course of a long period of time, you actually have an entirely new body after that cycle completes itself, depending on the system in the body we're talking about.
Right.
So these ice treatments may, it sounds like, actually positively impact or expedite that process, and also simultaneously, so it speeds up this cellular regeneration process if done appropriately based off whatever protocols are supported by science. And it also it applies a calculated stress that the body can adapt to, so that it you actually recover faster because you are adapting to a new stress, creating a new level of homeostasis.
Absolutely.
Is that kind of what you're saying?
Sort of, yes. And so when you start to take into consideration all the different factors, I mean, we can tie this into like trigger point therapy from a massage therapy standpoint. When you start to do trigger point therapy to someone, what does it do? It sets your body up to realize certain things are happening. And so on a neurological level, it's not like you think it through. Your body does this on a neurological level. So it goes in and says there's really not an injury there, so I shouldn't continually be telling this stuff to constrict. Okay, so what happens? It causes the body to relax on its own. When you do an ice therapy, the concept's similar, but you're literally killing cells. Okay, at extreme temperatures, that's what happens. And so, either direction, hot or cold, and just the reaction is slightly different, because in the cold, what happens? Everything slows down. When you put in the heat, everything speeds up, and that's the biggest difference between the two is that, right? If you want to flood something with a lot of for a lot of nutritional reasons on a muscular level, cellular based, you're going to flush it more with fluids, and it's going to bring those nutrients through, right? When you do it with cold, you can have that reaction if you hold it long enough, because then you get that flooding.
That super compensation.
That's super yes, and you get a large flooding. It's much bigger than if you do it with heat.
Mm-hmm.
And so, those are the things that when I'm looking at it,
it's very synonymous to the idea of nutrient uptake, of where, like, with things like intermittent fasting or rotating macronutrient profiles, creating more sensitivity to specific nutrients, like creating insulin and glucose sensitivity, protein sensitivity, those kind of things. Because of a calculated period of deprivation, it increases the potential for uptake due to the need. And so you're drawing out blood by the vasoconstriction and the cold therapy, which your body knows it needs to feed those cells, it needs to deliver nutrients and fluids and cycle out waste as well. And so then it says, okay, we haven't been getting blood flow to that area, so there's this super compensation. Are you alluding to the fact that maybe that is what is aiding in the expedited recovery? Is that what I'm getting at?
Is that the whole factor? No. Like I said, the reality of it all is just there's so many dynamics to it. But that's the reason why I personally, when I was using hot and cold therapy, when I was doing hydrotherapy with people with water stuff, it came down to, you say, cold factors, if you do it right, gives you both benefits.
Mm-hmm.
Using heat only goes in one direction. It doesn't give you both sides because there's no restriction.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and it doesn't give the body time to analyze the actual situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there's some different ties into this, but again, do I think is it going to give a major, absolutely off the charts boost? I don't think it does. Mm-hmm. It does. It definitely helps with injury recovery. Okay, and that's why when you go through the stages of rest, ice, compression, and elevation.
Mm-hmm.
It's to set the body up to react and to clean up the problems. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so like I said, when you're talking hot and cold therapy, that's the whole basis behind all of that. Have I clarified that very well?
For sure. Yeah. I'm totally on the same page with you and getting what you're saying. I just kind of wanted to break it down with those questions for our audience, to be honest.
Right.
So no, I really like that answer. So Chad, hopefully that gave you some good insight. Let's move on. So next, unless you had another point you wanted to make.
No, we can keep going.
Cool.
Chad, if you want more information on that, dude, we can talk more. I know we've talked a little bit about it on the forum, but there's a lot of depth we can go into that if you really want to.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. One last thing on that I would say is that heat, one of the good things about heat, not necessarily for recovery or injury, and there are benefits in recovery, but it's ergogenic in a sense, in that when you do dynamics, when you get blood flowing, when you do priming exercises, that enhances performance pre-workout. And when you do things like static stretches and ice treatments post, that's going to aid in recovery. So there are benefits to using heat for other purposes, I would say.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Well, and taking into consideration, it really deals with a lot with goals, because one of the things like heat baths and saunas and things like that, what does it do? It causes you to relax. People relax a lot in those kind of situations. If they're under a lot of stress, that's going to change things. You take somebody, you throw them in an ice bath, they're not going to relax. They're going to actually.
No, that's going to increase stress.
It's going to increase stress. Absolutely. Even if you're used to it, it's going to increase stress in your body because your body stresses to that kind of situation. While in the heat situation, it actually will calm you down. It'll bring things down to a more even keel. And so, like I said, it's very
depends on the use. Depends on the use. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so next comment is from Sarah Bromley, who's one of our newer-ish members, right? How long has she been in there?
Sarah's been in for, gosh, it's a good question. I want to say about a month and
yeah.
a half.
Cool. Well, we're happy to have you.
New.
She's been asking some good questions. She says, I'm a 29-year-old firefighter by profession. Thank you for your service. And a figure model and competitor based in Yorkshire. Currently working on gaining some lean muscle mass until the end of June, and starting to begin a 12-week cut. I will be competing in MPA in September and PCA in October. I'm currently on a strict diet to get the muscle I need to bring better stage presence. I'm very proud to be GHN sponsored athlete and part of such a great team. So kind of sounds like what she's focusing on right now is she's in her cut prep for her show, but she's still focusing on lean mass gains, this is kind of an interesting topic to talk about, because a lot of people struggle here when they're doing show prep. Now, I'm not a show prep coach, but I have a lot of friends that are competitors, and they talk about this. How do we cut and get leaner without cutting all of our hard-earned muscle? So did she expand further on that in the forum, or am I getting that right?
Yeah, she did a little bit. Some of the stuff you got to understand that you are kind of missing in that is she has a hard time gaining muscle.
Oh, okay. She has more of that ectomeso kind of a build, right?
By nature, right?
Do you know how tall she is? I'm going purely off visual, so
I don't off the top of my head. I mean, I've seen her, but I don't remember how tall she is, to be honest.
Sarah,
I just know she leans.
I am just speculating. So if I'm getting any of this wrong, just correct me in the forum. It's all good. But
yeah,
if she's more of a hard gainer, then she would lean that body type direction. I would assume.
Yes. Yes, I know like I said, I know by nature she's leaner.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of protocols that you can do. They're not very popular amongst at least our local and what I've done research on community of competitors. Things like intermittent fasting and different kind of techniques like that are, from what I've seen, very frowned upon in that industry. I think there are some more people coming up in the competing industry that are more open-minded to utilizing different tactics. But to be honest, one of the first things that I would do is potentially a carb cycle program, and where you're focusing, on a cut. However, you're giving yourself and you're training, you're alternating your training protocol, so it's not all cut focused, but you have periodic strength training days, hypertrophy days, and those kind of things, and then maybe you have more cut oriented days, more high intensity workouts, more aerobic. Excuse me. Lower caloric intake, lower carbohydrate intake, that kind of thing. What are your thoughts on doing something more like a carb cycle, Shane, with also training protocol cycling of periodization to salvage muscle but also cut simultaneously?
I think the carb cycling is something you can use as a fairly good avenue for certain details. My belief on carb cycling would be probably a little bit different than yours, but that's because I'm not a real big fan of carbs overall. I think they do a lot of damage. They cause a lot of issues with inflammation. That being said, they do help quite a bit with performance. You can't take away from the fact that they're a boon in the performance side of it. And so, the reality of it is, can it be used in especially in the case of gaining muscle? It definitely gives more girth, if you will, to muscle bellies by the nature of what carbs do.
And it does help with amino acid uptake as well.
It does help with amino acids. It is something that when you do carb cycling, because you can cut carbs out and carb cycling out completely and then come back to them. So what it'll do is it causes your body to have a little more insulin sensitivity as well.
And then it'll super compensate with glycogen storage at that point too. So your sensitivity to uptake increases, and thus things like muscle recovery or muscle repair. And just your overall look from the glycogen, not necessarily a lot of muscle mass gained, but can increase. And that's a big technique that competitors use.
Oh yeah,
for looking more muscular.
For sure. And that's like I said, can it be used for that kind of stuff? Absolutely. If you do the timing correctly, it will automatically go towards that kind of concept, because in competitive stuff, it'll actually give you a fuller look if you do it in such a way that you time it out so you have carbohydrates right before you go on stage. It's not right before, but I mean timing. The timing in theory.
No, I understand what you mean, and it can be quite sensitive. Like carb cycling is timed with more experienced competitors. It's timed down to specific hours, because it can be a very large visual change in just a matter of hours, depending on how you're cycling.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's why a lot of competitors look a lot better after they go through their competitions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They get out of the competition, they change how they're eating, and they instantaneously are in a more healthy state because their bodies have actually filled in correctly, and they would have looked better on stage if they had done it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like I said, if you use it correctly, it's actually fairly amazing.
Mm-hmm. Another technique that I would talk about using for cutting and salvaging muscle while you cut, because that was one thing that I had a couple of years ago when I first was introduced to intermittent fasting was, I'm an ectomorph, and I had put on, at the time from when I very first started lifting, I had put on about 40 pounds of lean mass over the course of multiple years, and I did a lot of work. I was scared to lose that muscle, and I said, I want to cut, but I don't want to lose my muscle because I've worked hard to build this. And I did a lot of research on it, and I started to see how supported it is by science, and how much is out there on intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting, though it puts you in technically to a catabolic state because you're breaking down adipose tissue and going into ketosis potentially. It actually has anabolic reactions in the body because it has a huge increase in things like your natural human growth hormone and testosterone output during fasting periods. So you can actually leverage those anabolic responses if you do it with the correct type of training and workout protocols. And I actually noticed I did a focused 16/8 intermittent fast, which is where you eat only during an 8-hour consecutive window and you fast for a 16-hour consecutive window, and that includes the period of time that you're asleep. And I restricted my feeding to that. I ate a healthy amount of cutting calories, which for me was around, I think, 2,500 or maybe 2,800, due to the fact that I am very physically active. So that's why my calorie intake was still very high during a cut. But I thought for sure that I was going to lose muscle and during this experiment. I did that consistently for 3 months. I did a 16/8 fast every day. I did resistance training, heavy resistance training with slow tempos, really focusing on the big compound movements for about 3 or 4 days a week, and then I just walked in between on the other days, about 30 minutes of walking, to be honest, at a low intensity aerobic heart rate zone. I lost 13 pounds of body fat and 0 muscle, and it's arguable that I actually possibly gained a pound of muscle, but the type of testing I did isn't entirely accurate, so I can't say that for sure. But I absolutely didn't lose any muscle mass, and honestly, I looked bigger after my intermittent fast because all my body fat had been cut away, or a lot of it had, and so I looked even more muscular. And that was from doing an IF protocol on about a 12-week cut. Right.
Like I said, I think the intermittent fasting is something that is beneficial. But like I said, we've talked about this a couple of times. My personal belief is it's not a question of cutting. It's not a question of anything like that. It's a question of what it does on a hormonal base, because it can. I don't want to use the word reset because I use that loosely. God, I got to say, dude, sidetracking for 2 blinks, I fidget.
I can see that. Your camera the whole time's like...
I have been all over the stinking place, and it's actually starting to bug me. And it's myself doing it. That's hilarious.
Hopefully our viewers don't have, vertigo.
Yeah, no doubt, because I'm always moving. But
they don't call it a laptop for no reason, right?
No doubt, because it is doing that exact thing, bouncing around because of it. Anyhow, the hormonal reactions and what it does on different reactions in the body besides just hormones themselves, because of how they affect everything else, like insulin resistance and sensitivity and things like that, all correspond with all this kind of stuff. I think that's the biggest reason to do this. Now the fear factor, what you're talking about, I think is a great thing to bring up, because you don't want to have that fear to do it. Mm-hmm. In most people, one of the things that happens is it will cause people to lean out. Okay. Not everybody. Mm-hmm. Some people that are highly thin will actually give them a little bit more expansion because of what it does on a hormonal base. It really is going to depend on the person. It's not going to make you less healthy. Would it make a better presence on stage? Depends on what you're going to do.
Yeah, it depends on how you use it.
Yeah,
because I will say, even though it cuts away body fat, it does, because you're typically, if you're eating in a deficit, right, typically, you're depriving yourself. So your glycogen stores aren't going to be entirely full. Your muscles may look flatter. You're going to flush water because you're not taking in as much sodium and carbohydrates, that kind of thing. So when I IF, in fact, I IF today for like more than a 16-hour fast. I've only eaten once today, actually, and I'm super lean, but I'm really flat right now. So like, if I go look in the mirror, I'm probably 169 right now, but yesterday I was 176. But I haven't eaten any food, like essentially, and not too many fluids. So my body has flushed. I'm kind of got that lean, deflated muscle kind of look, not that big, bulky, filled out look. So that's one of the negatives, I would say. It's not negative necessarily physiologically, but it's negative if you're trying to look bigger, muscular on stage. If you time it incorrectly.
Can be, right, and that's what I'm saying. Again, you got to look at the differences in how people's bodies react to it. But like I said, the reality is when you start looking at all the things that are surrounding it, it's very beneficial. Overall, because of what it does on a deeper level, and makes you substantially more healthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm not going to say that I would say go for it for leaning out, go for it for building mass. I would say if you want to be healthier, jump in and start using things like intermittent fasting. Mm-hmm. My camera is zooming in and out of and I'm not even doing that.
I told you, man. It's that HD camera with the auto zoom. I told you.
That is awesome.
It just likes you.
It does, and I can understand it.
Close up on shade.
Absolutely.
Well, we're kind of getting close to time. So do you have anything else you want to add to that, or should we call it?
The only thing I want to add is people need to understand that when they're doing their workout programs that they've got to correspond it. And this is the reason why, so behind the scenes, guys, Taylor and I have talked about this. We even talked about doing it today. We probably aren't going to do it today or even this week. But the reality is this is the reason why people need to understand body types and the differences that correspond with it. Because when you have a specific kind of body type, certain kind of workouts are going to be less beneficial for you.
Yes.
Everybody, because of how individual they are, you have to tweak them as you go anyway. But it really gives you a way to train that's different.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality of it is, you've got to find that sweet spot if you want to gain muscle while losing weight, losing specifically fat.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing I want to add. I don't want to go into it in too much depth because, like I said, then we'd have to go on and turn the show into something else.
Well, why don't we make that our next episode, and we'll record that for people and talk about that since that's top of mind. Does that sound good?
I'm okay with that.
Perfect. Cool. Well, there you have it, people. There's some of your questions answered by us on the show. So if you want your question answered on the show, you just got to go to Facebook and type in Metabolic Radio Private Forum and contact us on there. Leave your questions in the forum, and we'll be happy to answer them on the show for you. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes, and we'll talk to you soon.
Well, and one other thing. This may go up earlier on YouTube and then be put out.
True, that's true. And actually, so
there, boom.
we still have the learning curve, so just bear with us, people. But we're gonna put some links below of where you can subscribe to the podcast on different platforms and check out some of our programs. We just released the Nutrition Atlas, which is our guide that teaches you how to calculate your own nutritional needs. It's a calculator that is based off science, as well as the fact that it includes all the components that are required that influence your metabolism that many of the calculators out there online do not currently have. And we also account for the unique margin of error as well. And we tie in a lot of other things like body type specific nutrition, macronutrient breakdowns, how to calculate that for yourself, the margin of error. And then we also introduce the concept of metabolic flexibility, which is truly, in our opinion, one of the best ways to sustainably diet for your life versus a short-term cycle. So be sure to... Sorry, go ahead.
Conceptually, it's the only way to eat correctly.
Truly, yeah. We talk a lot about intuitive eating, nutrient diversity, cycling through different foods, and things of that matter. So be sure to check that out at metabolicradio.com. Check the links below.
Yep, Peace. That's it. Peace.